Breaking Bad left us with several questions, and for some reason, one of the most common is what happened to Walter's barrels. Did Jesse know the location of them? Did the DEA eventually find the money? Or maybe it's the lost treasure of Albuquerque? The questions continue, since the last time we saw the barrels was in Ozymandias, and from there that we know absolutely nothing about them. Probably, Vince Gilligan and the writers intentionally left the fate of the money unresolved, allowing viewers to imagine their own scenarios and creating a space for discussion among fans. They did the same with Gustavo Fring's origin, or how Walter carried out his plan to poison Brock. However, from some dialogues that exist in the Breaking Bad universe, we can come to a conclusion of the fate of the barrels. Before we begin, I warn you that in this video there will be spoilers for Better Call Saul and El Camino. Over the course of Breaking Bad, Walter and Jesse made a lot of money with their methamphetamine business. Money that was mostly wasted or lost. Walter used his money well to support his family, pay bills, his house, etc. But he was left with almost nothing when Skyler gave all the money to Ted, to save herself, and by the way, Walter, because if they found out she signed Ted's fraudulent books, sooner or later they were going to find out Walter was a criminal, although he did buy expensive cars twice. On the other hand, Jesse lost all his earnings in Season 2 and didn't use his money very well. Now moving on to Season 5, after Declan paid them for the methylamine, Walter didn't want to give Jesse his share in order to keep him cooking with him, but Pinkman wanted to get out of the business and left without the money. But months later, Walter visited him and gave him $5 million, money that made Jesse feel guilty, because for selling methamphetamine many misfortunes happened. The most recent, the death of Drew Sharp after robbing the train, that's why he considered this bag full of bills as blood money, and therefore, he gave it away. When Jesse learned that Mr. White poisoned Brock, he teamed up with Hank to catch him. Pinkman was going to help Hank a lot with his investigation because he knew Walter's dark side and what was more important to him, his money. So, with a fake photo, they made him believe that they found his money and they were going to burn it. And you know how it goes. Walter tries to save his brother-in-law by giving $80 million to the neo-Nazis. But anyway, Jack kills Hank, and together with his group they keep 7 barrels and leave one to Walt. About half a year passes and Mr. White returns to Albuquerque to get revenge. His intention was not to get his barrels back, as he managed to leave over $9 million to his family. Then, when he arrives at the neo-Nazi compound and murders everyone, Jack tells Walter that if he shoots him, he will never know the location of the barrels, but he shoots him anyway. In the Better Call Saul finale, we expected them to say something about the money, but in the end, it didn't happen. So, what is mentioned in this scene, this is the last we know of the 70 million or a little less, since in those 6 months that passed from the Ozymandias to Felina episodes, they had to have spent some amount, but I don't think a lot, since it is enough to see their appearance. You can tell they don't spend much on them. The guns they have are illegal purchases. They drive old cars, wear apparently cheap clothes, eat normal food, and probably smoke cheap cigars. But of course, they had to have spent on drugs, alcohol, and prostitutes, but with discretion and caution, as I doubt they wanted to launder some of the money. And I'm only talking about what was in the barrels, because they also made a lot of money selling methamphetamine, even though, at first, Jack didn't want to do it, because of course, 70 million fell from the sky. But Todd convinces him.
But this is millions. Uncle Jack, no matter how much you got, how do you turn your back on more?
Thanks to the movie El Camino, we know that Jack bought a boat and Todd bought an apartment, which he remodeled. But I don't think he spent more than $600,000 on all that. Plus, he was the only one of the group who was a little more delicate, who wanted to find himself in a weird sense. The rest just were who they were. And I repeat, I can't imagine any of those guys going to the trouble of laundering money. I can't see any of those guys buying a house in a nice neighborhood or even a nice big apartment somewhere in the city. They were kind of like Gustavo in terms of spending money. From his business, we know he had a lot of money, plus Los Pollos Hermanos gave him enough to buy this house and have more than enough savings. But even though he had hundreds or maybe billions from the meth business, he could buy a better house or car. Same with Ed or Mike. But I'm getting off topic. Apparently, the neo-Nazis are not very smart, but maybe they are, at least a little bit. Like I said, maybe they spent the money on unnecessary things, which makes them a bit dumb. But if you remember, they killed like 10 men from different prisons in 2 minutes. They also ran a meth lab for like 6 months without being discovered, which required some caution and precaution. Although if their previous job was to cause disasters or murder people, now with those barrels they didn't need to keep doing it, so they could go more unnoticed. Also, they had hundreds of millions of dollars and none of them betrayed the gang or killed each other so that one could keep it all. Basically, they were quite disciplined. Jack knew what he was doing. And thanks to this line from El Camino,
Uncle Jack taught me always keep my money close, so
we can assume that they had the barrels near them. Todd had money stashed in books and then switched it to the refrigerator. So since Jack always had his money close by, maybe a large amount was hidden or buried in the compound, and the rest they divided up to hide in the homes of the other neo-Nazis. However, of the 70 million, which they may have spent less than 10%, it remains to be calculated what they made selling methamphetamine, which they were still doing because Todd liked Lydia. According to this picture, 1,000 gallons of methylamine could make about $300 million. With 400 gallons, Walter made just over 80 million, and when he went out of business, there were still 600 gallons left according to Todd.
He ratted you out personally.
We still got 600 gallons of methylamine.
So, if they used almost all the gallons in 6 months, they made over 100 million, and plus what they had with the barrels, gives them almost 200 million, which Walter could have made if he hadn't gone out of business. Anyway, I know I got a little long with the answer, but the idea is to give some context and explain how the characters are to understand their motivations. So, in conclusion, the money may never be found, or probably the DEA could have found some millions in the houses of the neo-Nazis or in the same complex, but I doubt they could find it all then. If word gets out that there is a lot of money hidden, it would be like the hidden treasure of Albuquerque.